And we're live. Hi. Good afternoon. Almost said good morning. It's not morning anymore. Yeah, this is T-SQL Code Sins, and we'll talk about what that means in just a minute. I'm Jen McCown. I'm one half of the dynamic duo that is MidnightDBA.com. Just in case you haven't heard of us, and I know you all have, my husband and I do SQL Server training videos, SQL Server, Windows, PowerShell, and whatever we feel like it for our website. It's all free. It's all, right now it's ad-free, but you know, if you want to put an ad on our site and pay us, let me know. We do a couple different podcasts. I have my audio-only blogcast, and then we've got something that's really kind of catching on is our DBAs at Midnight web show, where we just, yeah, would you grab the other door too if you can? Or somebody? Where we sit around and talk about, again, whatever we feel like. We had a lot of fun. A couple weeks back, we got together with a couple of the guys in Seattle and had a big talk about the round of plagiarism that's been going through the online SQL community, and had a nice big vent at SQL Tech 2's expense. So that's on the website, and that was fun. Okay, so that's all about me. Okay, so why Code Sins? What does it mean? That's actually from a Far Side cartoon forever ago, and it was actually a picture of God at his computer and about to push the smite button, and I really liked that. So I just made my own because I figured, well, it's probably copyright, but copyright. So yeah, why Code Sins? Code Sins because we all do things that are convenient, or that, you know, we just kind of overlook something. Everybody commits code sins, and, you know, just regular mistakes, you know, we can kind of deal with. But the really egregious things that bother us and that make our life harder, it's a good idea to every once in a while kind of look at them and see, okay, what is it that I'm doing wrong? So, code sin 1. Oh, actually, before we get into it, I was going to actually open it up to you guys. Just from the title, any ideas on what might qualify as a code sin? What might qualify with you as a code sin? Yes, in the back, sir. Cursors. Cursors! Just all by itself like that. I like that. I like that. Here, pass him a pen. Anyone? There you go. Well, you held your hands up, kind of. I'm sorry. Well, I'm going to be throwing things at you throughout the day to keep you awake, so just so you know. Yes, sir. Hard coding values, for example, like current date equals 4-1-2010. If this, do this. Yeah, that might be pretty cool. Anyone else have something that just drives you up the wall? The whole reason was that a hand raise, or was that a...
No, I was going to throw out unusually large transactions.
Unusually large transactions. I like that too. I don't think I've got that in here specifically, but it probably falls under one of the umbrellas.
Implicit conversions.
Implicit conversions. Yeah, I think I like that. I can see how that can make your life a living hell. So, yeah, one of the things I was going to say, one of the reasons that some of the reasons I'm qualified to speak on code sins is, one, I've been in a lot of companies. I do some contracting. And, you know, when you come into a new shop and you look around, you usually find something really impressively awful that you want to tell all your DBA friends. You're nodding, sir. Yeah, that you're really impressively awful. That's something that qualifies as a code sin. The second big reason is that I've committed a lot of these sins years ago, and not now, of course. And so I'm uniquely qualified because I've done it, and also because these are things that really, really, by definition, make me mad. So it's a code sin because I say so, which is why I'm qualified. How's that for circular logic, right? All right, so coding ugly. You know what? I opened up the wrong slide deck on here, which is why I can't follow my notes up here. But coding ugly refers to a couple of different things, and we'll jump into that. Number one is formatting. Anybody open up a lovely little code like this before? Or I had someone point out before, which is one big long line of text. I've had that, and that's a lot of fun. Forgive me for a moment while I pull up the correct set of notes, will you please? There we go. See, this is only my second time publicly speaking. I make videos, but I have time there to back up and edit out pauses and ums and things like that. Not so much here, I found out. If you tell everybody pause, reverse, no one pays any attention. It's really a shame. There we go. We got it. Okay, so yeah, that will actually run. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. I had to purposefully do that horrible thing to a piece of code for my demo, and you hit F5, that'll run. You can do that. So that's, people don't bother with formatting. Let's see. We're past that. Stream of consciousness writing. Yeah. Let's see. Code and ugly. I swear we'll get back on track in like 10 seconds. I know. Okay, so code in general, written text in English, and I say in English because other languages may do something weird. We break it up into sections with white space. We have words, we have, with space on either side, sections, paragraphs, chapters, because we don't absorb knowledge a chunk at a time. We absorb it a word, a concept, an overall theme at a time. So it's the same thing with written text as it in a book as it is with written text in your T-SQL code. You really need to, oh, that's the wrong thing. Really need to break up your code and make it readable. Now, a couple of the notes on that. If you don't want to go and spend tons of time formatting your own code, doing all that kind of thing, there are code formatters that will do it for you, at more or less at the touch of a button. And this is word wrap, so it's not quite as pretty. I use SQL Prompt, and I adore it. That's all I have to say about that. It's awesome. We had this big discussion last time I spoke about the different formatting things you can have. But yeah, it's way easier to understand the code that's broken up properly. So we'll jump on to the next part of coding ugly, coding without any kind of documentation. So I pose the question to you, why does doing documentation suck so much? Yes?
Because by definition it's going to be out of sync.
It's going to be out of sync, absolutely. Yeah.
It's like doing the work twice.
It's doing the work twice. You have to keep it up, and you have to go back after the fact potentially. Anyone else here hate doing documentation? You got a couple hands. The rest of you are
You can't read my code.
just don't have time. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And I've been told that before. Everything you need to know is in the code. What do you want documentation for? Just look at the code. It's obvious, right?
It's easy to read. Why do they call it code?
If it's easy to read, why do they call it code? I'm repeating for the microphone. I'm recording my presentation. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, we actually said some of these things here. It's a pain to create. It's a pain to maintain. One I didn't get from you guys, I'm surprised, is I'm afraid I'll document myself out of a job. And that's actually a common concern. My answer to that is a company is going to keep you or fire you regardless of what you document, and I've found this to be the case. They don't, in the end, they don't care about documentation. If they didn't care enough about it to make you do it in the first place, they certainly don't care enough about it to have it for the next guy. This just my theory and my experience. Thank you. I need someone to give me words occasionally as my brain goes off into left field. So we've already talked about how that's a book. Okay, so how do we solve most of these problems? Document it in the code. Now, while I understand that doesn't really apply for tables necessarily, and you do have to find an external solution like a wiki, so much of the business logic is in your stored procedures, in your functions. So much of that is in there, and you're already in the code and creating it and modifying it. So let's see. Oh, that's the wrong slide. So let's take a look at a couple of examples, and we will get off of documentation here in a little bit. Oh, that's the wrong one. That's the pretty formatted procedure. So here we've got some decent code. Now, a pain to create, a pain to maintain, absolutely. Not if you get in the habit of writing it as you go along, as you're coding your procs. When you modify your procs, if you notice you've got a note in there on why you did something a certain way, like down here, then modify that comment, add to it. It's really not that difficult if, like an exercise regimen, instead of making yourself get up and go to the gym, or exercising all at the end of the year, which would be the equivalent of after I'm done with this project, I'll go back and document it then. Document it while you're doing it. Out of curiosity, hands up, how many people actually do that, document after the end of a project, go back and do it? One. Is it because your boss makes you do it? Yeah, absolutely. Right, because nobody wants to do it. And even if, I did have a couple of people before who said, no, I do it for my own choosing. You're not going to remember the reasons why you did every little thing the way you did. Well, I had to put this particular exception in here because there was a transition period on the business side thing and the thing. You're not going to remember that 6 months later at the end of the project or 2 weeks later. I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning. Maybe that's just me. Okay, so back to fun stuff. Oh, we were going to talk about how awesome comments are. We talked a little bit about how text is like a book. Books are, especially tech books, are really awesome at navigation. They've got page numbers, they've got indexes, they've got table of contents, all that kind of thing. You can do that in your code. As you go through, you make section headers with little explanations. Throw that into a table of contents. How happy would you be if instead of opening up a piece of code and seeing something like this, which is barren of any kind of explanation, you go in and see, oh, look at that. Not only do I know the standard, who wrote it and when, I know what kind of copyright it has. Does anyone copyright their code? Even under Creative Commons? Description, discussion, links to external resources, like, say, for example, your blog, where you explained the entire thing in a demo. That's another reason to start blogging, right? This would be delightful. Okay, we'll get off documentation, but my thing is, if you're annoyed, if you get to the point where you're really annoyed with all the documentation talk, that's good, because you'll remember it when you're writing a procedure. Oh, that girl document. Oh, I'll go ahead and put it in a table of contents here. So, let's see. This is great. I do have to pimp my website one more time. Sean has this absolutely excellent video on documenting SIS packages. It's a little bit weird to say you'll never look at documenting SIS packages the same again, but he makes it easy and he makes it make sense, and the whole thing is right there. Real quick, extra added benefits to documenting your code inside the code. Whether you're in a shop that actually has no documentation requirements, or whether they're on the we require way too much, this is an excellent way when you're done and you have to do your documentation and hand it over. You just pull it out of the code and largely slap it in there. Work done, boss impressed, on we go. All right, coding dumb. Oh, real quick before, I love that. Real quick, any comments real quick? And if you have really egregious documentation stories, you might want to save it for the end, because that's when we're going to give away a couple of our free books. I have my own swag, so in addition to the drawing. But any comments or questions real quick on the most interesting topic in the world?
I just have a question. Does anybody try using extended properties on table of contents procedures to document those things?
That's a good question. Does anybody here use extended properties to document your database?
I tried it once and nobody looked at it.
Nobody looked at it. That's the big problem with extended properties, is that they're so way in the back, and you know, even if you use them and then you extract the information, it's something that you have to really do extra. Commenting your code, either way really, as a method of documentation, like I said, isn't perfect because it doesn't encompass all objects. You know, people don't generally look at the code for a table, so even if you put a big explanation in there, you know, it's not going to be something people look at. But there are other solutions. My favorite, really, to encourage people to contribute to documentation is setting up an internal wiki and saying, okay, you know, and the way we talked about this earlier, getting people to use it and actually update it, is every time you say anything, oh, I coded this new module. Good, did you put it in the wiki? You know, anytime this happens, good, did you put it in the wiki? You know, oh, I documented that, it's in the wiki. Don't ask me the question, go read the wiki. All right, coding dumb. You don't have to know everything about SQL. Nobody does. Are you laughing at the picture again? I like it too. But ignorance of the law is no excuse in the end. So, the first part of coding dumb is not fully understanding the data model. And on the one hand, it seems like the kind of thing that doesn't really need to be said out loud. But on the other hand, it apparently does. Ask me how I know. It's bad because data will be wrong. You're going to be using the wrong data because you don't know how it's used within the database, because the guy who wrote the database didn't tell you. Your queries are going to be slow because you're not going to find the best and straightest path between, say, two objects to get the right result set. Why doing it right is good. It's a lot easier to tune and optimize queries when you really understand the database as a whole. And this is kind of an offshoot of the documentation thing. That's a really big thing of mine, because I come into a lot of new shops with no documentation. But you've got to reduce your misunderstandings as much as possible, reduce impact of, I coded this module, this guy coded a module, oh, and now they break each other. So, oh, that's right. I have an absolutely fabulous demo for this one. I really like it. I have been in a couple of shops. Now, everyone understands, almost everyone understands foreign key relationships and how in this table something may be named, boss ID, and it refers to something over here, ID. That's easy enough to get while looking at the database if you see that if they actually have constraints implemented, right? But something like this, wherein they had a table, let's see, that's the one. I came into a shop, and this is for real, and they had a table called Mox Associate that was part of their nightly load procedure where they pulled in a bunch of information from a DB2 database. They crunched a bunch of numbers, and this was a processing table. So for every associate, it did this massive nested loop, call 1,000 procs per associate, 8-hour-long process. And I had to write a procedure, or modify a procedure that affected this Mox Associate table right here. And I was doing my best to go, okay, this is based off of the is vectored, but it's not working right. And I went back to the architect and I said, this is how I understand this is supposed to work. And we sat down for like an hour and a half trying to figure it out. And he finally said, oh, I remember, that's right. That in the process at step 13 is vectored means that needs to spur off the vector process. But at step 20, it means that this particular associate is vectored. He's part of the vector group. And I said, so that column means different things at different points in the process. He said, yes. I said, alrighty then. Part of the advantage of, actually understanding the database, getting a thorough understanding, is showing up bad design and hopefully being able to address that. So, if you have, again, really bad design stories, please save them. Save them to the end. We will talk. We'll have a good time. All right, hang on. Come back. There we go. That's not what I meant to do. We'll flip ahead, shall we? All right. We weren't coding for performance. You laugh. You're my people. I like that. This again was in real life. Somebody approached me, and we had a discussion. And it was this project that they assigned me to, the bosses assigned me to, because it was having horrible problems with performance. It was slow. We were getting close to the go-live date, and it was just unworkable. So I said, okay, and went to talk to the data architect that was on the project originally. I said, hey, Steve, we found I found these odd things in the database. I wanted to ask you about it. Why did you do this? And he gave me an answer. And okay, good. Why did you do this? And with each successive question, he stood up a little taller and got a little bit more angry. And finally, after about the 10th question, he put his hands on his hips. He says, well, we weren't coding for performance. Oh, that's a conversation ender, as it turns out. That's not something you can talk about after. If you're not coding for performance, that's exactly what you're going to get. You're going to get something that runs very, very slow. It's one thing to look at a query and optimize it fully and spend an hour on it and make sure that it's ideal and it's got a covered index and all that kind of. I know that we can't do that for every single query, every single process. But I'm going to say it's a mortal coding sin to code without even considering performance. There are a good many things that you can do just off the cuff if you don't know thing one about performance while you start learning a little bit along the way. Here are some really, I don't want to say basic, here's some really essential things. Cursors, as you said, that's absolutely the number one. Query hints, does everyone know what a query hint is? If you don't, good for you. It basically tells the SQL engine, don't do things the way you think are best, do what I say is best. While that can occasionally, one time out of 1,000, be to your advantage, most of the time it's not only applicable, but people tend to overuse it, much like giving a kid a sugar bowl with their cereal. They're not going to put on a spoon, they're going to, I like cursors and query hints. So, GUIDs, is anyone making... I won't say is anyone making use of, because then we'd be like, ha ha. Does anyone have the kind of aversion to unique identifiers, the overuse of unique identifiers? You're familiar with unique identifiers.
I've seen it.
You've seen it. You have a horror story for us at the end of the show?
It was like a 3-year debate on why we should be using it. I lost it.
Oh, that's a shame. I was on a project a while back that had over 1,300 tables, and every single one had a clustered primary key GUID. Their fragmentation was across the board 100%, and that's bad. We can talk more about GUIDs later if you're not familiar with it, but GUIDs themselves have their place, absolutely, but they tend to get overused. Any of these that you guys actually want to talk about in depth, or would you like to just kind of go, what's next? Anybody interested in overusing indexes? Underusing? Everyone's kind of tired? Yes, sir.
The other thing about the GUIDs that all cluster around is what the impact they have on non-cluster.
The impact they have, yes, they're very large. That's part of the reason not to use them. 16 bytes. I always try to say bit when I mean bytes. 16 byte identifiers, as opposed to your nice, safe 4-byte int, and that's multiplied because it's referenced, it's held in your non-clustered indexes. So if you have 5 non-clustered indexes, each one of those has 4 times the amount of data that it might have if you used to say an int identity. And yes.
So they have their places. Where would you want to use a GUID?
Well, the GUIDs themselves are really, really cool in concept because they're unique across the universe, which I know that there are some articles about exceptions to that, but right now we're going to go with the premise that they are unique across the universe. That is really, really, really cool. And I could imagine potentially some really, secure, sensitive kind of, none of these can possibly ever be duplicated. But if you have to use a GUID, then you cannot cluster it.
Right.
That's the big rule. And I have yet to run across a situation where you have to have a GUID. I really have. I agree with you on that. In theory, I could see it. Yes, sir.
Back in 2000, for merge replication, you needed to have the row GUID from all the ways you were replicating.
Had to have a row GUID?
Yeah.
I didn't actually do a lot of replicating on 2000, so I'll have to take your word for it. But
Well, that's the same case in 2005.
But you don't have to cluster on it, do you?
No, there's no good. Yeah, there's no clustered on it.
Yeah.
It's just a index reference.
And I know Kim Tripp has recently written a blog about using new sequential ID as opposed to new ID. And new sequential ID will give you a GUID, will generate a GUID that is greater than any other GUID in your database. So that kind of solves the clustering problem. It doesn't solve the size problem, but if you've got a situation like mine where you've got a legacy database, 1,300 tables, it may be the option that you have, but do your best to get it off the clustered index. All right. That was fun. Yes, I'm sorry.
About over-indexing OLTP databases, I
Yeah.
understand how it will affect insert, update, delete statements. How will it affect the optimizer with just running select statements when a table is over-indexed?
I don't know that it does. The whole point is that you're making your indexes and updates work harder because they have to go out and change every single. If you've got a table with 10 non-clustered indexes on it, it's got to go out and update all of those 10. Selecting doesn't change anything, so
Give the optimizer more choices, though. You're looking at the query plan or building the query plan.
Yeah, you give the optimizer more choices, but it's a matter of balance between, how much do I want to make my optimizer work as opposed to how many reads and writes. That's why I said don't under-index your largely read databases, your OLAP, your reporting databases. You're not doing a whole lot, or you're just doing bulk loads, for example. Then, yeah, absolutely, index that puppy until you run out of space. Yes, sir.
One of the things I compared to a SQL 2000 server
Uh-huh.
customer that had about a 15 gigabyte transactions file because they hadn't done maintenance
Yeah.
of their transaction log file.
Yep. I'm facing that recently.
And just putting in a small maintenance plan to shrink that thing down,
Mm-hmm.
suddenly performance came back.
Yeah.
And no other coding, no other sins that they committed really.
That's letting your transaction logs, and understand that my list,
It's
my
not complete,
Yeah, no, these are the things that bother me the most in recent history for one reason or another. You will absolutely come up with your own list, and I'd be delighted if you sent those to me to build up future blogs and presentations. So send me your horror stories. All right. So yeah, if you're not familiar with performance tuning, that's fine. Learn a little bit. Get familiar with a few things. Maybe pick up a book, pick up a couple of blogs. There's no reason to say, well, I can't do it because I'm not an expert. No. Just learn a little bit, and then learn a little bit more, and so forth. And understanding SQL Server. Now, it's kind of a spin-off from understanding your data model, but then again, it's kind of not. You need a basic and growing understanding of SQL. And you guys are already ahead of the game because you're here at SQL Saturday, so I'm kind of preaching to the choir. I'm sorry. I've typed something confusing at myself. That's very strange. I shall have to correct myself later. SQL databases, rather, they're kind of a black hole. People put things in, data comes out, end of story. Our jobs as DBAs, some of you may be developers, but it looks simple, What? You just put data in, you get it out again. What's the big deal? But there's so much that goes on behind the scenes because a database really is different from an application. With an application, you're asking the computer to do one or even several relatively small tasks at a time. Get me this, go do this mathematical operation, display this web page, and so forth. And I'm not at all trying to undercut what developers do. It's not something that I could do today. But with a database, it's just a different mindset. What you're doing is asking the SQL engine to sort through potentially millions of rows of data to deliver back unto you a certain subset of it. So understanding the best way, enabling SQL to find the best way to, and the most efficient way to bring that data is something that we really need to get to know, right? That's kind of my little mini speech on developer DBA relations. Don't fight, let's get along. Okay, so the basic life cycle of a query. It's really interesting how the query gets passed in and then it's parsed, and then this part is passed to the cache and this part does this. And let's see. I hate calling it this, but it's not just Brent Ozar's book, but the book written by, recently, Brent Ozar and several different people. They're giving away a few copies later on. SQL Server Troubleshooting and Internals has an excellent bit in the first chapter describing exactly that, the life cycle of a query and how it's broken down and so forth. How a query is parsed. It's Itzhak Ben-Gan's book on T-SQL Basics that talks about how, and this was kind of a revelation to me when I read it, how this part of the select statement is parsed first, and this part is next, and that part's next. It's not done top down. It's actually the from clause is evaluated first, and the joins and so forth. And the order by is last, which is why you can use aliases only in the order by. But having that understanding to work with for your T-SQL code, it will really get you very far, make it a lot easier to come up with decent solutions. So, don't go get data that you already have. Now, select star falls under this category because you very rarely need every column from a database. But why is this bad? Does anyone want to hazard a guess? Can everyone see it okay? We're getting data from table 1, then we're getting from table 2, and then we're getting different data from table 1, right? But we're getting different data from table 1 using the same where clause. So instead of assigning X and Z at the same time, we're going to this particular table twice. This is exactly like going to the store to get eggs, picking up your dry cleaning, and then going to the store to get milk. You're doing twice the amount of effort. I'll go ahead and, I was going to skip over this, but I have a small demo. That's fun. Let's see, header template, cursors are bad, MK. Already did that one. Getting data you already have. So we're going to set statistics on, and we're going to get a couple of things from the database. First is our double hit that we've marked very clearly. And let's see, room building and room name, building ID is and room name. So we've got the same where clauses to get two different pieces of data, just like we did there. And then our single statement to do the exact same thing. We run it, it works, fabulous. Let's take a look at our I/O statistics. And it's pretty easy to prove. And, if you need this for your developer friends, look, it went out and it hit that table twice in cache, sure, but it did it twice as opposed to our other one that did it once. Save your logical reads. I know, very simple, very easy, but we like simple and easy. Coding lazy. Now, we kind of strive as DBAs to be lazy and as database developers to be lazy in a good way, in ways that save us trouble. I would rather go through an hour of effort now to save myself 40 hours of effort this month than just do an hour every single time the issue comes up. But there are bad ways to be lazy as well. The code crutch. No tool is all-purpose. We tend to fall in love with some aspect of SQL. Oh, XML, it's so cool because you can just store anything and I'll store it in the database and I'll parse it out. XML is cool, absolutely. But you can't use it for everything because there's a performance hit. Storing data in, tearing it apart, taking it out again. Understand a tool's proper limitations and proper uses. GUIDs are another example. Like I said, generally speaking, you don't really need GUIDs especially, but I could see the proper place for them. Another big example is nested views. And I had this discussion with the same guy, by the way, that told me that we're not coding for performance. Nested views, you understand, a view selects from a table or more than one table, and that's great. A nested view, this view selects from this view and maybe another and maybe a base table. I will say that on its face, there isn't anything wrong with that. You don't get an instant performance loss with nested views. You don't. I've tested it. The problem comes in when you have, especially when you have multiple nested views. It's another one of those things that people like to use and reuse and overuse, where not only have I experienced this, but this is a story I got at the last time I gave this talk, is an 8-level deep nested view structure across the entire database, wherein at some levels they were actually referring back to the base tables that had already been referred to in child views. So you've got that double hit scenario going on many times over, and you've got a support nightmare. There was no way to tune a query that goes on to that pulls from a nested view. I've tried it. You just can't break it out that far. So it actually does really destroy your performance. All right. That's what I call a code crutch. Blind code reuse. Now, I didn't want to say code reuse because, again, we love reusing code. We love finding a solution and then going, okay, great, this works and I can put it over here too. The difficulty is when you get comfortable, a little too comfortable with it and say, okay, I'll slap that right over here and all is well and it works beautifully. It may well work beautifully, but you may have an extra join, an extra clause in there that you don't need, that isn't applicable. That one's kind of a quick hit sin. Look at your code. We are moving right along, aren't we? What kind of time do we have? 4:05. When do we end? We're doing great. We're doing great. Y'all are still awake, right? Oh, you know what? Chocolate break. Somebody want to pass out chocolate? I nominate you too. And there's more. Yes, I brought you. I'm sorry, there may not be enough for anyone. I encourage everyone to share. But I know it's late. There you go. Okay. So if you can't read the little text, it says, "I'm sorry, I can't hear you over the sound of how awesome I am." I like this one because I found this after the one I saw of Obama standing in front of a flag and it said the same thing. I really like that one. So coding lonely, again, kind of doesn't apply to you guys, or maybe it does. Portions of it does. It basically means being a DBA. We are by nature problem solvers, and we solve problems. We want to sit here and we want to look at this until we figure it out. The problem is that our database is connected to a real world. It models a real world with real business rules that we aren't in charge of. You know. So lonely at work. You code in a vacuum, you're very likely to miss business rule changes or to get business rules headed your way that you've never even heard of, and it's production time. Okay, great. I say interact with your team on purpose because it is something that you have to do. Thank you very much, helpers. And there's more if anyone wants to come up and grab some. We're very informal here. Oh, I should do my little thing. Compliments of Cozy Rock. Did I say that right? Yeah. Who is also sponsoring SQL Saturday Dallas, and you should come out and see us. But yeah, seek out your boss and not only make it known what you're doing, but make it known your accomplishments, you know. Seek out your coworkers, even if you don't like them. Somebody asked that question, what if you don't like them? Well, interact with them once a week and then go wash your hands. Or whatever you need to do to detox, right? Go blog about it, yes. Steve at work said, no, let's change his name. Steve then at work said. Okay, so another sub-sin, lost and confused. And this goes back to requirements. It's another kind of a dirty word, sort of, because requirements, ugh, you know, who wants requirements? Who wants to go through the bother of that? Well, you know, since you're trying to model a database or code for a database that is modeled on the real world business, you kind of need to talk to the people in charge of making those business rules. Getting requirements is something of an art form, or maybe you could call it kind of a training for a marathon, because it can be, I'm mixing metaphors now, it can be like pulling teeth in a marathon, so. All right, I gotta rewrite that. But you kind of have to go to these people, find out who's in charge first off, because that can be difficult to discern sometimes, and say, okay, what do you need? And they tell you what you need, and you say, oh, okay, and you go away. Oh, no, that's a bad idea. You sit in the meeting and you say, what do you need? And they tell you, and you say, okay, so do you mean this needs to be like this? And there's, like I said, there's an art to talking in this sort of, it's half English and half database, right? You have to be able to say, all right, what do you need in relation to the database, without speaking like a DBA, because they don't understand that. Okay, well, how about this? Have you considered that there may be more than one person that has one of those? Oh, no, I hadn't. That's true. More than one person may have one of those. Okay, great. And will that be provided by more than one vendor? No, that's just the one vendor. For all time? Oh, well, no, maybe in the future they don't think the way a DBA does, so pull it out of them, you know, while you're running or something. Lonely code. This is just a big spiel. Code reviews. Somebody said recently, oh, yes, we do code reviews. I said, really? Real code reviews? As opposed to just, nah, looks good. He said, yeah. I said, oh, can I come work for you, please? Seriously. We're all very proud of what we write. As well we should be, because we spend a lot of time coming up with the best way, the fastest way. But everybody makes mistakes, you know. If you go out and read some of the big-time bloggers, you'll go and see comments in there. Oh, you made a mistake here. Oh, okay, I'll fix that. Purposefully put your code in front of other people. Demand that other people look at your code. And if it's somebody, if you're the only database on your team, which I've also run into, put it before a developer and sit down with them and say, okay, here's what I'm doing here and here's what I'm doing. Every so often they'll be able to say, oh, well, we're doing this way, and so that's not right. Oh, okay then. Very, very valuable. No one to play with, and that just refers to the SQL community, which again, you're already here, so I'm preaching to the choir. But just in case this is your first ever SQL Saturday, or you had a horrible time and you're never coming back again, then find something else that you like as well. You're laughing. Find user groups, find webcasts, find whatever you want to get into. There's a great Twitter community focused around SQL, probably more than one. All kinds of things. There's code camps. You can volunteer with PASS, the big conferences. It's good stuff. So this is our resolution slide, our final, this is what we're taking away. So when you document like you're explaining it to the new guy, because not only are you, because you'll get another guy on your team, you'll get somebody assigned to your project, but you're going to come back to what you wrote 6-8 months later and have no idea what you were talking about. Explain it to your future self, so your future self will look back and say, thank you, past self. I really, really appreciate that. Keep learning. I don't have to tell you guys that. That's the third time. You guys are awesome. You're here. Let's hear it for the crowd. Work with SQL, not against it. I love the few of you that started to clap. Thank you. Yay me! I'm so cool. You are. Work with SQL, not against it. SQL, especially, this is really targeted at the developers out there, if you're there. Your .NET guys, your C# guys. SQL is there to help you. It's not there to make you angry. Learn how to work with it, and it will make you happy, and it will do things very quickly and so forth. And follow good dev practices. So I am thinking we should open this up to story time, because I love stories and I have free things. I have an official Midnight DBA mug, and it's what I call the aggressive mug because it says things like, "Oh look, I found the problem. It's you." And this is my personal favorite, and I have a shirt that says this. I'd be wearing it if I weren't wearing a speaker shirt. Every time you shrink a database, Paul Randall tears off an angel's wings. All-time favorite. Wish I could claim that, but it's not mine. All right, so, okay, who has horrendous stories? And if it was something you did horribly wrong, that's okay. Just say Steve did it or whoever. Please, tell me your story.
And actually it was kind of funny even at the time, and unfortunately we were in front of the customer and I didn't know how to not laugh. But we were doing the Yelp process, and there was in the original database, in the source database, there was a yes/no field. There was a bit field. So it was true or false. That's all we had to work with.
Sure.
And the person who was giving us the requirement said, I want you to convert the yes, no's, and maybes. And I said, we don't have any maybes. Well, you need to convert them if they're maybe. And I'm like,
convert them if they're maybe. Would you like that database in mauve as well? I'll get right on that.
It was impossible to explain to her that if they never captured them in the past, there weren't going to be any in the future. So
the answer to
maybes when we convert
there are no maybes.
But
The answer to that is I'm right on top of that, Rose.
yeah, no, we got you.
Mm-hmm. You had one as well, sir.
Yes, my name's Andre, I'm a DBA.
Hi, Andre. And I'm a code sinner.
I worked in the group, and luckily I killed it, but not all of it. 'Cause it
You killed your group?
organization that kept going with it. But someone designed a database where the tables were called entity, role, action, which is basically noun, verb, adverb, adjective.
Oh my God.
In this case, it was tracking like smallpox vaccinations.
Okay.
To track the fact that you had a smallpox vaccination took 55 table hits.
No.
When the Java programmers started testing it, 2 of them locked the database.
Yeah.
It could not scale.
I've been there.
I then put in my solution. It ran in 51 milliseconds.
Excellent.
It's just one little table. You know?
That's a rock star moment when you get to go in and go bloop, and then the light comes out of it and goes, ah.
It took almost 2 years to kill the database. I had to name it Godzilla.
Yes, you miss in the back. What is your name? I know. Go ahead. I'm a database developer. Don't give her a hard time. Oh God.
On the right monitor, I thought I had FileZilla, and I hit refresh to see if the back monitor it ran my script.
Okay.
And luckily, it was like a syntax error.
Right.
I actually had updated a few tables, and I like,
Which tables?
okay, what just happened?
Yeah. We should add that to the code sin list. Is being absolutely certain of what you're doing when you're opening a production. Yeah. That's nice. That's nice. Yeah, I was going to say a production thing. You remember back in the days before we had a log off button? You remember? On the computer, and you'd log into production, and then the window, you'd Control-Alt-Delete to get out of there, and then you'd look at it very, very carefully to say, okay, I'm not shutting down the database, I'm logging off. I'm not shutting it down. 3 times, every time I would do that. I'm not shutting down, I'm logging off. Okay, good.
I've done that.
You've done that.
I've shut a server down.
We've had some good horror stories in the past from the professionals. If you want to get on and see some of the interviews from past last year, Itzik himself and Grant Fritchie got on and told their horror stories. And yeah, I like hearing about that when famous people screw up because it makes me feel better. So, okay, any other major? There's swag involved. There's free books. Any other major code sin stories?
Along the lines of the copying code without fully understanding it.
Uh huh.
We had some people, some actually college interns translating some Pascal code for us.
Mm-hmm.
And they,
What could go wrong?
yeah, well, what we were doing was taking 20 to 30 minutes per system to do this operation. And we complained to one of our vendors. that it was taking so long, and we had like 9 of these things to do, and it was taking a half hour each time.
Right.
And he goes, oh yeah, one of those aha moments. He says, we had these college kids doing our translation, and they had, in their code, they had come across this section they didn't understand. And so they had put comments in the code that says, we don't know what this does. So we're just going to comment it out.
That's an acceptable solution.
And what it was doing was they were commenting out the part that was only supposed to process what changed. And so whenever we ran the code, it was processing the entire system.
Instead of a diff, you were doing a full.
Yes. And so he like uncommented.
That would go under understanding your code. Absolutely. Yes.
So once he made that change, now we were down to 5 minutes per system times 9.
Absolutely. Yeah, paying attention to the coding for performance thing, paying attention to indexing is something that I'm startled how many shops are like, oh, we've never even considered that before. And that's, again, a rock star situation where you get to come in and say, index, I have increased your productivity. Yes, sir.
I was at a place where when I first got there, we found 8,000 jobs on one server.
8,000 jobs on one server.
They were doing 4 different things, and what we found, and it took us a long time to get rid of them all, but what we found was about 5,000 of them were sending emails out that were basically batch emails out from to other systems. And what the person had done as their solution was to build a template using OA create to call a COM object which fit the information into a message queue that would then send the email out with another listener on the message queue.
Sure, because that's the simplest
Every
solution.
time they needed to change the subject line of the email or the information in the email, rather than having a table and having one job or something, they decided to make a copy of the job for every customer. So they had 5,000 SQL statements for 5,000 jobs that were really just email templates going out.
That's outstanding. That is absolutely outstanding. All right. Okay, we got another one. Are you guys good with the story? This is sort of the venting portion of the show. Is this good? We can go back to me talking, but I like this. Yeah.
One of those stories where it works fine when the system's small, but as the system grows,
Yeah. Everything runs fast in dev. Absolutely.
So here it is. We have this table, and it's going to run a bunch of SQL queries, and it runs about 700 queries. So they're hard coding into the table and just executes them. But before it does it, between each call, it drops the indexes, runs the query, and rebuilds the index. It went from a 3-hour job to a 10-minute job just by getting rid of the index drops.
It really is extraordinary the lengths to which we'll go to make things as difficult as possible for the SQL engine. And then people wonder why the database runs slow. So, okay, well, good, excellent stories. I love it. We're actually finishing early, so if you guys want to hang out and talk and get more stories, that's great. But let's get you, and then we'll give prizes, and then we can finish up however you like.
We had the instance of we're using BizTalk, and
that story ends there. Come get your car. I give you a car.
BizTalk
Nobody else wins. That's it. No, go ahead.
BizTalk is a message spooler, and it's a message distributor, and so a bunch of developers got together and thought, well, we don't know everything that this is doing, and we can't tell because you'd have to read the book.
Yeah, well, books.
And so we don't know what it's doing. So let's take this message spooler that's supposed to be working on a high-speed system and make it right in a relational database, and let's let's structure this thing in such a way that we can tell every step of the way what every message is doing. And they did that. And it took them, I don't know, about 1.5 years. And as soon as you got 9 records in there, it just doesn't work very well.
I could see
but
that.
It seemed like a good idea at the time.
That's kind of the call, the battle cry for all failed projects. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Yeah. All right, well, let's take a couple of minutes. Let's see. Really good stories. You, sir, in the green. You, sir, in the yellow. Whoever had the 8,000 tables, I'm going to start off with, okay, 8,000 tables gets a book. Who is that? 8,000 store procedures, rather. You had the 8,000 store procedures. Please come and get your free book from A-Press. Thank you, A-Press. Let's see. I'm trying to remember who else. I should have been doing this all along. There you go.
Like
documentation, yeah.
Like documentation, yeah, writing things down. If you'd like to come up and grab something, I was at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Who else told me a story? I'm sorry. Next time I'll write it down. Here you go. I thought you'd like that. Yeah, absolutely. Finish comments. And we're ending early, and I totally did that on purpose so that you guys could have extra time. What's that?
That's a code.
Yeah, well, it's what they give us. But yeah, it's a new book in their library. So, all right. Well, any other questions or any other thing you'd like to share? And if not, we'll go ahead and cut this off. All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate you coming out and hanging out with me. And enjoy the rest of the conference if you're staying.
Good question.
Yeah.
The cursors. I hear